Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics. Today I'm going to show you how to make this adorable hot pad using the Creative Grid 10-inch log cabin trim tool duo. We have been doing quilts and now I thought it'd be fun to do a coordinated project for just one block and turn it into a hot pad, so I'll be showing you how to do that today. These fabrics are from the Bess Flower Garden from Marcus Brothers, and as you can see from the quilt behind me, which is a completely separate project and not related to the ruler in any way, we just thought it was such a gorgeous Americana look that I wanted to keep going, and we've been making maybe some smaller wall hangings, which I think are nearly sold out or perhaps sold out by the time you're seeing the video. And I thought, hey, why don't we do a fun little hot pad as well? And this may be the first time you're being introduced to this ruler, so I'll go through that as if you've never been introduced to the ruler before. All kinds of possibilities. If you've never used a Creative Grid ruler or tool, I can't endorse them enough. They're just phenomenal. Each one is fun to use and the possibilities are really exciting to be able to take your fabric stash, use this creative tool, and now you'll have a precision that is just undeniable and fun to use. So with the 10-inch log cabin trim tool duo, they give you 5 possibilities. They have an image of each of those shown on here, and the one that we'll be doing today is the Courthouse Steps. So I'll be talking you through it from start to finish, and you'll be able to grab your own ruler, make your own blocks, maybe make your own hot pads. Limited kits available of this one, or use your own stash and be able to just make maybe table runner sewing blocks in sequence, a quilt, hot pads, or who knows, many more possibilities. So let's dive into the instruction booklet, and I'm going to give you some options along the way that I have found to be really, really helpful. So inside our guide, we mentioned there's 5 different possibilities. So right away, be sure to acclimate to what you'll be doing. But starting at the top, there's some important information that will carry through to no matter what style of block you're using. So let's just start at the very top. This is the non-slip, as they always have this incredible grip on the back. I love that because as I'm cutting, and of course these are very precise cuts, I don't want that tool to be shifting, potentially resulting in a miscut. So right away they've got the nice non-slip grip on the back, and it says the 10-inch log cabin trim tool duo provides the choice of standard strips at 1 inch or skinny strips. We'll be doing standard strips today at 1 inch, but again, if you want to be doing the skinny option, there's 2 of those included inside your ruler. This also comes inside the instruction booklet, comes inside your ruler. And by the way, I wanted to mention on the Creative Grid USA website, if you ever lose your booklet or you want supplemental videos, or even in this case, what's going to be called the sewing and trimming sequence, which we'll talk about later, you can go to the Creative Grid USA website and download all of those things for free. And I love that. So if you ever lose this, don't worry. They have got you covered. You can go there and get another copy of that. So let's again continue on. One of the things that I want to mention is that the blocks, all of them inside here, can finish as big as 10 inches. But if you want to have a block that's smaller, simply don't put on all. You've got your center, and then you have basically 4 rounds. If you want to have a smaller block, maybe only do 3 rounds. So that's a possibility as well. But if you want to go all the way, the biggest block this one will make will be 10 inches finished. We'll always start off with each, at least on these 3 blocks, with a 2.5-inch center. But this is the part that I right away want to mention to you, and I want to encourage you toward the sewing and trimming sequence, and here's why. On the next step, once you have your center cut, it says cut the strips any width as long as they're at least 1 3/4 inches wide. Cut all strips slightly longer than needed. That's the part I actually want to encourage you for. What does that mean? So let's jump ahead to the block we're actually going to be doing, and that's right here. Notice this is my center right here. And these are my 2 blocks right here. And notice how they have this top strip just some random length longer. Well, Creative Grid created the sewing and trimming sequence, and this is what you really want. Rather than cutting these strips just to some random longer length, if you go ahead and download the sewing and trimming sequence, we'll right away go to Courthouse Steps, 10 inches finished, and I'm going to put this away because I'm going to be talking you through the rest of the instructions. So right away, instead of just cutting the length to be somewhat longer, so here's my center square, and if we were, and that's 2.5 inches square, if it was just something longer, it's 2.5 inch or 3.5 inch or something longer. What I like about the sewing and trimming sequence is they say, let's go ahead and cut our first and second lights. This is our first and second lights to be that exact length of 2.5. Now it matches up perfectly and it keeps everything just squared up and you're not wasting fabric and potentially trimming a lot of fabric and throwing it away. So our first step is to go ahead and cut our fabrics to those specific lengths. And I've gone and done that, including the next rounds. So those will be ready to go. But let's start off with sewing both of those on with our 1/4 inch. You want to be really solid on that 1/4 inch seam allowance throughout this. And then once we sew our first 4 fabrics on, 2 on the left, 1 on the top and the bottom, we'll begin to use our tool. So now just keep pressing. We'll just press away from the center every single time. Just like that, every time. If you do that, no problem. So again, if you follow the instructions inside the guide, it says for this next log, next length, you could just trim it to any length that's this length or longer. What I like about it being the precise length is it keeps me in check. It makes sure that my sewing is an accurate 1/4 inch every time. Versus if this strip was longer, I wouldn't really know if my 1/4 inch is in check. So we've pre-cut that to the exact length and notice it fits. Now I've got my seams on this side, so I'm going to go ahead and sew on this side because I don't want to get any rolled seams. I'd rather see them up on top and be able to work with them. And I will now on the other side, let's double check that. Yep, that looks good as well. We can just go sew them both while we're there. Probably could have pinned those both, huh? It's okay, I'll pin them separately. All right, we'll go sew 1/4 inch and then we'll have our first round done and we'll be able to now go use our tool for the first time. Now I'm going to grab, it's called the purple thing, because as you approach this seam's going to want to roll. And of course we all put our fingers in there, but this is a nice little safety thing there. I am so excited to show you how to use this tool. This is so cool. I just love it. You know, I have to admit that for years I avoided learning to use new tools. I'm like, no, what I learned works well. And it did. It worked pretty good. But these tools, once you learn how to use them, are so much fun. And the precision it's undeniable. Okay, so let's go ahead and again press toward the outside. And now we get to use our tool, and we'll be able to get a little bit closer to the tool, talk about how we read it. No matter what size or what style of block, this approach really will be the same. So let's look at this real quick. Maybe I'll turn it back. This might be easier for you to see it if I've got a white piece of paper here. Okay, so you'll see log cabin trim tool dual, so definitely make sure it's right side up. It's very easy to flip these over, and of course that's confusing. You've got your nice 1/4 inch seam allowance around the perimeter, and notice it says standard round 1, round 2, round 3, and round 4. That's going to be us today. If you're doing some of these other ones with the skinny strips, you'll be progressing more into these round 8s. For what we're doing, because we have our center plus 4 rounds, we'll just be using 1, 2, 3, and 4. We'll be doing many more videos on the other features of this ruler at another time, so be sure to subscribe so that way when we do talk about these other types of the skinny log cabin, you don't miss out on that. So since this is our first round that we've got everything sewn on, we'll bring this I'm going to use my spinning mat because it's just convenient, very nice, not a must. You know, certain projects where I'm like, oh, just get this spinning mat. The project won't be nearly as feasible without it. This is a nicety, not a necessity. But now you see how my white box frames my center, and I have the dash lines here. We're going to get a nice close-up of that where you're seeing the dash line coming across here. You've got lines here, and I have my nice white box around that. So from here, I'll be able to trim one side, rotate my mat, and trim the second side, and then we'll adjust our tool and trim the other 2 sides. So make sure you've got everything where you want it to be. So I'm just going to keep rotating that block because I know these 2 sides over here with me are ready to go. I'm going to flip the ruler. I'm not even touching my fabric at this point. I can leave it in position. Again, I now am lining up my white box around my center. My dash line is coming right along my red strip, and dash line is here, and then solid line. So once you feel you have that alignment, again, you're going to just press down. And now your first round has been trimmed. Now we go ahead and move on, and this is something that I want to encourage you toward, is to reacclimate the block. What does that mean? It's now that this is square, for my next log, I could sew this really on almost any side of this quilt and it would fit. So we want to make sure that we reacclimate that. So let's grab those sides. Let's make sure that we're doing our measurement check here. Everything's looking really nice. So we're just repeating that. So this is going to be my sight picture. It's very easy to, of course, sew this to the wrong side. So we'll sew those on, right side together, just like we did. Sew from this side so we don't get a rolled seam. Press to the outside, and then with our blue and our red. So I'll go ahead and do that. I want to come back and trim with you one more time, and then I'll be sewing the rest of the rows on and we continue making our hot pad together. So I'll get started pinning and sewing. I'll go ahead and have it pressed to the outside, and we will trim our second round together. So now we have our second round. So going to our tool again, we were at round 1, and we will just now be looking for round 2. I know it's a little hard to see with the overhead camera right here. So then after that, we trim. Well, let me just start with that. I just want to show you that step one more time. You just kind of progress your way across this tool. And you could square up that going this direction. And I actually like that because I have my lines going this way right along my seams. But you can square that up this way or this way. It doesn't matter because this is a square. But I just feel that when I'm in this orientation with my block, these dash lines should be, theoretically, if I sewed that perfectly, running right down those. And I'm in the ballpark, so I'm just going to average that out, trim those 2 sides, move that out of the way. And let's continue rotating the mat. that we know those two sides are cleaned and ready to go. And it's these two sides now that need to be trimmed. I'm trying to get my head out of the way. Lining everything up. Okay, so now you're on to your round 3. So again, if you're using the sewing and trimming sequence, which I highly, highly encourage, you would have pre-cut your strips. We would now be on our round 3, our first and second light. This strip would be cut to 6.5 inches, both of these, and one blue and one red are our first and second darks. Those would be cut to 9 inches. Sew those on. Use round 3 to trim. Then for your final round 4, your first and second light will be cut to these measurements here, as well as the 2 out here that are the blue and the red. Now I went ahead and did that ahead of time just to save us a little bit of time, and that's what our block will look like right there. And with your final round, that's right here in the middle. Part of the box is outlined in black. Let me flip that over again. It's a little bit hard to see. It's right in here, right in there. Round 4, 3/4 of it is in black and just a touch of it's in white. That's where you place that, and I've already trimmed mine up, where you would place that right here. And now you're trimming around all 4 sides of your block. Once that's done, your block will now measure 10.5 inches. And just like I said, who can make that precise on their own? I'm not that good. So these tools help us look great. All right, once that's done in your kit, or maybe you're going to be doing this project from home, you'll want to get some Insulbright. If you will be using this for hot items, this is called Insulbright. It has a certain, heat-resistant capability to it. So we'll have a backing, whatever backing fabric you want. We also used a piece of batting from Hobbs. Then we put our Insulbright there, and then this will go on top. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my Wonder Pins, because what we did with ours is we just stitched in the ditch. It's a great option. You could, of course, do all over quilting, but anytime I have these strips like that, I really love to be able to stitch right in the ditch. And of course, you could use a basting spray if you wanted, but I think that the Clover Wonder Pins are even better. So let me grab those and we'll go ahead and start pinning this together. And then we'll use our coordinating thread. We used a cream to stitch in the ditch here, our red, and then our blue to stitch in the ditch there. And on our machine, we just used whatever backing fabric you'll be using. You'll want that to be in your bobbin the whole time. That way on the back of your project, it coordinates with your backing fabric. Let's grab those Wonder Pin, or those Clover Wonder Pins. Those may be new to you, and I'll show you how those work. Here are the Clover Wonder Pins. Remember back in the day when we would pin our quilts? I'd go to the junk drawer in my house, true confessions again, open it up, and I would be scrambling for safety pins of all different sizes, all different colors, and some were much blunter than others. So Clover, bless their heart, said, people, we know you've been jigging in your junk drawers for pins. And of course, these are so much better. So many cool features. They have a nice kind of, it's just, they made it for quilting, right? So just pop those in there, keeping in mind that we want to be able to stay out of the track of where our sewing machine will be coming down. So just be putting these in position. You can start with the center and work your way out. I love that these pins solve that problem, because I rarely could ever find enough safety pins. I think there's 20 in a package here. Yes, and they're kind of pink and yellow and fun. So go ahead and pin everything through with all of your pins. Just grab those out. And again, stitch in the ditch. Now that's not new. Maybe it is new to you. Again, red thread in there, cream in the bobbin, and I just kind of separate the fabric with my finger with my straight stitch. I just come straight down the middle. And you're quilting through all 3 layers. And of course, that's after everything is pinned. Once that's done, we'll come back And we're just going to trim off the excess and we'll move right into our binding. And if you are inclined to want to be able to hang this up just to have it pretty for display, I'll also go over how to make the hanger, how to insert that as well. So when I get back, let's go ahead and I might even just trim that up so we can just keep going. Where this is now going to be trimmed up to 10.5 inches square. It's all quilted together, and we'll move on to even how to splice our binding strips and make our hanging tab. Okay, so I have everything quilted and I went ahead and trimmed up my block. Now remember, it measured 10.5, but naturally as we did that stitch in the ditch, it got a little bit smaller, but I made sure that when I squared that up, that it's truly square. So notice how there's just a little bit of my Insta-Bright showing. That's okay. We'll be taking care of that when we put our binding strip on. Now, if you're going to be getting our kit, what's included for your binding is actually this fabric here. And from that, these are two 2.5 inch by width of fabric binding strips, and you'll only be using one, plus a little bit of a second strip. From one of those strips, once you cut the two, you'll go ahead and cut one of your strips for your block, set that aside, and you'll use a second strip cut to 7 inches, and that will be if you want to do the little hanging tab. If you don't think you're ever going to use the hanging tab, you can skip the step that I'll show you right now, but if you think that's something that you might want to do, fun to display, then go ahead and just take your binding strip and we'll just cut off a length that is about, I think we did about 7 inches on that. We'll just get that and we'll trim that. And it's pretty straightforward how to make this, and this will work with any time you want to make a hanger for really anything. It's a great technique. Turn that around. 7 inches is what I'm looking for. So let's set that aside, and we'll be using the full strip and our partial strip for our binding. And I want to show you a really cool way to join your binding strips, different than the way that I learned. So when you, if you're going to make the hanger, you'll go ahead and just press this in half to create your center crease. And then once you have that, you'll just be folding those two halves toward the middle. This side and this side. Pressing again. Then you'll simply fold in half and just stitch down there with a, kind of a scant eighth. And you could stitch on both sides if you wanted, but that's now stitched and ready to go. So if you want to go ahead and do that hanger, let me just flip this over so you're able to see how you prepare that. So here's what it looks like. You've got two raw edges down here. So go ahead and just lay those. Maybe on here it's probably easier for you to see, where the two ends are the same. And you just kind of tuck that under at the point. You see how I did that? That's all you have to do. And let's go ahead and give that a press. Put that over there. If you are going to put that in, and I'll just assume we're going to do that on ours, so you're seeing that happen. And I'll turn it around so it looks exactly the same way. You can put it wherever you would want to have that. Let's see, where did we put that on ours? We did that kind of opposite the blue. That works. So let's go ahead. And you can kind of just position this in the corner. And I'm going to go ahead and trim that just a touch. And I'm going to come in and base that in position. I don't want to deal with that when I'm putting the binding on. You have enough going on with binding that the last thing you want to have to worry about is, oh, is that hanger still kind of nestled into that corner? So let's go ahead and take care of that right now. Just a little stitch in the corner here. there we are. All right, once that's ready to go, you might even consider leaving a pin in here, kind of going a little bit shallow. That way, when you're putting your binding on, that doesn't accidentally kind of move over and you potentially sew that in. So just something to consider. Binding, I mentioned there's a really cool way to join your binding strips. If you're like me, you probably learned that when you have your binding strips, our first step was to just go ahead, clean off that edge. So we had a nice 90-degree corner. And with our second strip, I'd open this up, and this still works. And hey, by the way, we have a full series I recorded some time back on different options for doing binding. So the way that I learned was to lay this like here with a friction pen, draw a line corner to corner with a straight edge, try to pin that, walk very carefully to my sewing machine and sew on there and hope that I nailed it so that when I turned this through, it's just this continuation. Better technique today. I love this technique. It's how I do all of my binding. Here, all binding strips will be right side up. It only works with this tool if this is right side up, and I'm going to be using my corner clipper. Now I've cut my binding strips to be 2.5 inches. So I'm going to take the corner clipper, and there's my 2.5. So I'm going to place it such that that's right in my corner, and you can see that diagonal right there. Let's go ahead and cut that. And what I love about this is now I can see exactly how that fits perfectly. Isn't that just incredible? No more guessing if my location is where it should be. So now I'll just go ahead. I'm going to pin that, and then I will meet you over at the sewing machine, and we will sew our binding strips together. Okay, let's see how we did. Isn't that nice that that corner clipper just does that job for us? And I like to press my seams open. Some people even like to shorten their stitch length. That's an important kind of part of your binding, is right at those junctures. So isn't that just nice? It just does a beautiful job. Okay, so just like you would expect, we'll press with the wrong sides together. We'll speed that up for you. Okay, our binding is prepared. Now you may already have your favorite binding technique. Go ahead and do that. If you're like, I don't have any binding techniques, I don't know how to do that, let me show you right now. So with your very beginning portion of your strip, you folded that in half with the wrong side together. Go ahead and open that up, and I'm just folding that to make a 90-degree. This is just one approach to binding. That might be a good option for you. So we like to start on a side and never in a corner. Corners create problems for us because there's already a confluence going. And I'm going to show you as well how to do a nice mitered corner over here. So that way maybe you're fairly new to quilting and maybe you don't know any of these steps. That way you can be successful from start to finish if you go ahead and get your own Log Cabin Trim Tool Duo tool and be able to make the hot pads. So let's go ahead and pin this in place. And I like to start sewing with our 1/4 inch, and I've got a different foot in here. It's a 1D. I'm sewing on a Bernina today. I'm sewing on the 770 Quilters Edition. I like that foot just because it just seems to plow through the fabric very nicely. I'm going to start with a 1/4 inch seam, and I'm going to come to about here, and then I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to lower this fabric, you'll see, and we'll pick that up, but we're going to leave a channel here. So when we come back around, the tail of our binding is going to scoot right inside that channel, and we're going to tuck that in. But I'm also going to show you how to miter a corner. So I'm going to show you all of those things today. So let's go ahead and get started. This is where you might want to choose a coordinating thread. I have a blue in here because I will be sewing this down to the back, and that will be showing. So about here, I'm going to stop that. And I'm just now going to close this flap and start sewing again. And this allows, again, that tail, once we come around, to scoop right inside here. So I'll start sewing about right in here. Now I'm going to stop a 1/4 inch away from this end. Now I know where a visual 1/4 inch is. If you're not, go ahead and mark that place. If you're not comfortable with that, you can go ahead and grab a ruler and go ahead and mark that. But just know you're going to stop here. Now I'm going to turn the project a little bit so you can see this. I'm going to lay this binding strip back until I create this 90-degree corner like that. Now that I have that, I'll fold this back on top of itself until now I'm coming down this side, just like that. You have an option. You can start sewing right off the edge or start in a 1/4 inch. I've seen people do both. Both seem to work. I'll go ahead and just start sewing right off the edge, and we'll keep going. I'm going to stop again. I want to show you this once again. Again, see how you just make that 90-degree, just like that. Some people even go in and press that. You know, that's up to you. Fold that back over on top of itself. And now you're traveling back now in that direction, just like that. So now I'm approaching this spot, and I'm going to go ahead right now, and I can see that I'm going to land right about in here. I'm going to go ahead and clip this, lift that flap up, and tuck that inside, just like that. So it's nice and snug. I'm going to trim that just a touch shorter. Hopefully you can see that. I want you to see this flap here. You're just tucking it inside. You made a little kind of place, a little home for it to be. Okay, and we'll keep sewing. All right, so now our binding is on, and you have a choice now of hand tacking that or sewing that by machine. So we'll just roll this to the back, And that's where the Wonder Clips come in. I love my Wonder Clips. We do like to sew things down. This is something that's going to get washed and used, and I'm going to sew that one down by machine. So I will roll this to the back. And when you put in your Wonder Clips, knowing that this part's going to be to the bottom against the table, make sure the clear part is on the bottom because that's the flat portion. As you've seen these in the past, this is a curve and this is flat. So you always want the pretty color toward you. So you just continue Wonder Clipping just like this all the way down. And in the corner, we have our nice little miter. Fold one side over like this. In fact, let me just put a couple clips in. So you can just fold that in like that. And then you'll just fold that back on top of itself. And just put a clip right there in that corner. Hold that in place, just like that. You'll continue clipping all the way around. I want to mention one option for you. Where our binding started and ended, we know there's a little bit of a flap here, and we've got quite a good tail in there. I can't imagine that that tail, especially after this is rolled to the back and sewn down, it's nearly impossible that that could possibly come out. But if that bothers you, that there's that little bit of a gap there. In fact, let me just roll that to the back so you can see that. If that bothers you, just get a needle and thread in coordinating color, and you can just go in there now, even before you hand tack that to the back, and just do a little blind stitch and get that completely closed. So that's an option for you. I can just put a couple stitches in so you see what I'm talking about. Just like that. So that's just depending on your preference and if that's going to bug you. But again, I have zero concern that, especially when this is sewn down, that could possibly come apart. But I'll just finish putting that little stitch in. It only takes just a little bit of time. And I can even tie off. I would have probably started here and went back here and tied off underneath to completely hide that. But I'm just kind of showing you a quick version of how you would do it. You just quickly tie that off, and you probably won't even see it even if I do tie it off from the front. All right. I'll just continue to clip all the way around. And then if you have never done binding with your machine, I'll just give you a couple pointers here. I'll continue clipping, and then we'll be at the machine, and I just want to give you a couple pointers of what has helped me be able to, again, kind of stitch in the ditch, so to speak, to secure my binding from here, but also be sure to catch that on the back. So I'll keep clipping, and then I'll see you at the machine. Okay, so I mentioned that I'm going to give you some pointers. So we have, of course, our blue thread. The goal is, of course, that, we don't want the thread to really be showing. So you can pull this apart. And I know that Bernina even has a special foot that is exactly for this. It tends to kind of spread this apart and drop that stitch right in there. And I don't have that foot with me. But of course, Bernina has a foot for nearly everything. But let's just say maybe you're sewing on a different machine. Our goal will be to go ahead and sew right into that gap and be able to catch that in the back. So make sure you're pushing that binding all the way to the back. And let's go ahead and start stitching. And I'll be pressing that open. How fun is that? And just like that, we have our hot pad. It's ready to go, ready for gift giving. How great for a housewarming gift. So many times at the end of making a quilt, I have these scraps and I'm like, I can't give them away. I can't throw them away. I just feel like I want to do something with them. I usually end up donating them because I know there's so many people that love to do charity quilting, and thank you if you're part of that amazing group. But how fun to be able to make very scrappy hot pads, be able to make and use them, and again, give them away as housewarming gifts. So if you haven't tried the Log Cabin Trim Tool Duo, grab that. And by the way, go over to the Creative Grid USA website and you can just click on instructions. You'll be getting the sewing and trimming sequence that lets you know that exact length to cut the logs to be able to make your courthouse steps, log cabin blocks, and others as well. So thank you so much for spending a good part of your day with me. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make this hot pad with this amazing new Creative Grid tool. I'll see you soon.